The night air in Norfolk, Virginia, carried the salt-tinged breeze from the Elizabeth River, a scent that specialist Leah Carpenter had grown to love during her 18 months of service. At 23 years old, she was a proud member of the United States Navy, though her current assignment as an administrative clerk at Naval Support Activity Hampton Roads often felt worlds away from the ocean she could see from the base's waterfront. She had always dreamed of something more, of something tangible that proved her worth in a world that often made women feel like they had to fight twice as hard for half the respect. It was just past 11 o'clock on a cool Friday evening in late September. Leah had stayed later than usual at the base gym, pushing herself through an extra round of deadlifts and sprints. She was training for a Spartan race, a goal she had set for herself to prove that she was more than just a desk jockey. Her dark hair was pulled back in a damp ponytail, and she wore navy blue running tights and a gray hoodie zipped up against the chill. She decided to take the short walk to a nearby 24-hour diner off Terminal Boulevard, a place known as The Anchor, where service members often gathered for late-night coffee and greasy spoon comfort food. It was only a 10-minute walk from the base's perimeter, a route she had taken dozens of times without incident. The streets were moderately lit, and the sound of occasional traffic provided a familiar soundtrack to her thoughts. As she walked, her mind wandered to her younger brother back home in Ohio, who was struggling with his decision to enlist. She was composing a mental letter to him, full of encouragement and tough love, when she noticed a dark sedan slow down as it passed her. She didn't think much of it at first. People got lost in this area all the time. But a few moments later, she heard the car again, and it was coming up behind her, slower this time. Her training kicked in, not the Navy training, but the street-smart instincts her father had drilled into her since she was a teenager. Pay attention to your surroundings. If something feels wrong, it probably is. She crossed the street, angling toward a more well-lit gas station that was still open. The sedan, a beat-up Chevrolet with tinted windows, turned as well. Leah's heart began to thud against her ribs, a heavy, rhythmic drumbeat of adrenaline. She quickened her pace, fumbling in her small gym bag for her phone. Before she could pull it out, the sedan screeched to a halt beside her. The passenger door flew open, and a large man with a shaved head and cold, empty eyes lunged at her. "Don't scream, bitch!" he hissed, his hand clamping down on her arm with brutal force. The smell of stale beer and cheap cigarettes washed over her. Leah didn't comply. She never complied. She dropped her weight, a move she had learned in a self-defense class, and tried to wrench her arm free. But he was too strong. Another man jumped out from the driver's side, and together they manhandled her toward the car. Leah fought with everything she had. She kicked, she scratched, she tried to bite. She managed to land a solid kick to the shin of the first man, but it only seemed to enrage him. He cursed loudly and, with a grunt of effort, shoved her headfirst into the back seat, climbing in after her. But the driver jumped back in, and the car tore away from the curb before the doors were even fully closed. Inside the car, the world became a nightmare of confined terror. The man in the back with her was a mountain of muscle, his weight pinning her down as she thrashed and screamed. The driver, a wiry man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, laughed from the front seat, a cold, hollow sound. "Scream all you want, girl. Shh, no one's gonna hear you." They drove for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 15 minutes, heading into the industrial wasteland near the port, a maze of abandoned warehouses and shipping containers. The car finally stopped in a dark, secluded lot behind a derelict building, the only light coming from a distant, flickering street lamp. This was the place where they intended to break her. And this was the place where two cowards planned to assert their power over someone they saw as an object, not a person. They dragged her from the car, and the assault began in earnest. It was a blur of tearing fabric, harsh laughter, and the overwhelming stench of evil. She was hit, thrown to the gravel, and degraded in ways that would shatter most people. But in the deepest, most primal part of Leah Carpenter's soul, something didn't shatter. It bent, and then, like a coil under immense pressure, it began to push back. The fear was still there, a cold river running through her veins, but it was being flooded by something else, a white-hot, incandescent rage. She wasn't just a woman in a dark lot. She was a sailor in the United States Navy. She was a carpenter, and she was done being a victim. The two men, arrogant in their perceived dominance, made a critical error. They underestimated her. They saw her fighting as the futile panic of prey, not the calculated resistance of a predator in training. As one of them, the bald one, stood over her, gloating and adjusting his belt, he left his leg exposed. It was a momentary lapse, a split second of carelessness. Leah saw it. Her vision tunneled. The gravel bit into her palms as she shifted her weight. She didn't think about the technique. Her body just knew. She exploded upward from the ground, pivoting on her left foot with the explosive power of all those deadlifts and squats. All her weight, all her fury, all her despair channeled into the hard bone of her right shin. She aimed for the side of his knee, not the front, targeting the lateral ligament with a precision she didn't know she possessed. The sound that echoed off the corrugated metal walls of the warehouse was sickening. It was a wet, sharp crack that was instantly followed by a high-pitched, animalistic scream from the bald man. His leg buckled sideways in a way a leg should never bend, and he crumpled to the ground, clutching his knee and howling in agony. The fight was over for him. The second man, the driver with the spiderweb tattoo, froze for a single heartbeat. His face contorted in a mask of disbelief and then rage. "You stupid bitch!" he roared, lunging at her. But he was angry, and anger makes people sloppy. He threw a wild, looping punch that Leah easily ducked under. As he stumbled past, off balance, she grabbed a handful of his jacket and used his own momentum to swing him around. She swept her leg low, taking his feet out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of him. He was faster to recover than his partner, scrambling to his knees, but Leah was already on him. As he tried to rise, she brought her knee up with devastating force, connecting solidly with his face. There was a crunch of cartilage, and blood sprayed from his nose. He roared in pain, but still. He tried to grapple with her, grabbing for her hair. She twisted, broke his grip, and then, with a grunt of pure exertion, she drove the heel of her palm upward, catching him under the chin. His head snapped back, and he fell onto his back, dazed. Leah stood over him, breathing in ragged gasps. She saw the fear in his eyes now, the same fear he had tried to instill in her. He was on the ground, vulnerable. He tried to kick at her, a weak, thrashing motion. She sidestepped it easily, and then, with a cold, deliberate focus, she brought her foot down onto the side of his extended leg. It wasn't a kick with a running start. It was a stomp, a hard, vertical strike using all her body weight. Another sickening crack echoed in the lot. The spiderweb man screamed, a guttural sound of pure agony, as his tibia or fibula, she didn't know which and she didn't care, gave way. Silence descended, broken only by the whimpering and moaning of the two men writhing on the ground. Leah stood there, shaking violently, her body a canvas of bruises, scrapes, and dirt. She felt a cold wetness on her skin that wasn't her own sweat. She looked down at her hands. They were scraped and bloody. She looked at the men, now harmless, broken things on the gravel. She had done that. She had survived. Numbly, she patted her pockets. Her phone was gone, probably lost in the car or on the street during the abduction. The gym bag was gone, too. She stood there for what felt like an eternity. The adrenaline slowly ebbing away, leaving a bone-deep exhaustion and a creeping tide of shock. The moans of the men were a distant, unpleasant noise. Then, in the distance, she heard a sound that cut through the fog. Engines. Multiple engines, the deep-throated rumble of large vehicles. Headlights appeared at the entrance of the lot, not just one or two, but a whole column of them. They were military vehicles, Humvees, support trucks, and utility vehicles. And they rolled into the lot with purpose, their high beams flooding the scene with harsh white light, illuminating the two broken men on the ground and the lone battered woman standing over them. Leah raised a hand to shield her eyes, her body tensing again, unsure if this was another threat. The vehicles stopped and doors flew open. Men and women in Navy uniforms, some in camouflage, some in physical training gear, spilled out. They were a mix of ages and ranks. But they all moved with a common purpose. They were the 282 sailors of a Naval Special Warfare Development Group, the elite training command that operated out of the same base. They were the best of the best, the men and women who trained the SEALs, the support personnel who made the impossible missions possible. They had been returning from a late-night field exercise, a convoy of nearly 30 vehicles, when a sharp-eyed lieutenant in the lead Humvee spotted the commotion in the isolated lot. And he had seen the struggle, the figures on the ground. On instinct, he ordered the convoy to stop. Now, they surrounded her, but they didn't touch her. They saw the state she was in, the torn clothing, the bruises forming on her face, the blood. They saw the men on the ground. In a heartbeat, the most experienced corpsman in the group, a grizzled senior chief with 20 years of service, was at her side, his voice calm and steady. Ma'am, you're safe now. My name is Senior Chief Miller. I'm a medic. Can you tell me your name? He didn't touch her until she acknowledged him, his hands held out where she could see them. Leah looked at him, at the concern in his eyes, at the ring of sailors forming a protective perimeter around her, their backs to her, their eyes on the darkness. She looked at the two attackers, now being roughly but expertly secured by other sailors, their screams of pain ignored as zip ties were applied to their wrists. The enormity of what had just happened, and what had almost happened, crashed over her like a wave. Leah, she whispered, her voice cracking. Leah Carpenter, I'm a specialist, at the base, admin. Senior Chief Miller nodded, his face grim. He was already noting her injuries, the way she was shaking. Okay, Specialist Carpenter, you're going to be okay. You did good. You did real good. He glanced over at the two men on the ground, his eyes narrowing with a cold professional assessment. Looks like you handled things pretty well on your own. The next few hours were a blur of activity. Norfolk police were called and the scene was secured. The two attackers, both with prior records including assault and battery, were taken away in ambulances, their broken legs a testament to their victims' ferocious will to survive. Leah was wrapped in a thermal blanket by one of the female sailors and gently helped into the back of a warm Humvee. She was given water, and the corpsman stayed with her, monitoring her for signs of shock, talking to her in a low, soothing voice, keeping her grounded. At the hospital, she was examined, treated for her cuts and bruises, and a sexual assault forensic exam was performed. It was a grueling, invasive process, but the nurses and the advocate from the SARP, Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Program, were kind and professional. Through it all, the sailors from the convoy didn't leave. Thus, a rotating guard of 2 or 3 of them remained in the waiting room the entire night. They didn't know her, but she was one of them. She was Navy. And you don't leave a shipmate behind. Days turned into weeks. The story inevitably spread through the base. But it didn't spread as a story of victimhood. It spread as a legend. Did you hear about the admin specialist from Norfolk? The one who was abducted by 2 guys? Yeah, she broke both their legs. They waited for the cops with them screaming on the ground. The number of SEALs involved in her rescue, the 282 personnel from the command, became a part of the lore, a testament to the sheer, overwhelming force that had arrived to find her standing victorious.